CavsCast. I'm your new possible permanent host, Joe Gerberry, alongside your familiar face and voice, Seth Wanamaker. You guys will hear this on Friday the 16th, unless you're here with us on Facebook. This is one of my first times going live with you guys. When we did the quartercast, we usually just record in secret and then publish it the next day because if you are watching, you can see my office here is multi-purpose. It is my wife's home office, craft room, kid room, so whole bunch of stuff here. Seth, this is our first time actually being on a pod together. Literally have I think I've only talked to you, this is now I think the second time, so it's a pleasure. But you had put up the bat signal and wanted some help, so I came running to give you some assistance with the CavsCast. So how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, and I appreciate you jumping in. I severely underestimated how difficult it is to get a different, whatever you want to call it, second chair, second host every single week, and it absolutely snowballed on me. So thank you for saving me, and I'm doing very well.
Yeah, I will say it is much harder to do. I have not done. You've done something I haven't done, which is a solo podcast. I do not think I would be able to do that myself. But when we have done the cornercast, I will say it is very different to have a 2-person podcast and then have a 3-person podcast. 3 is like super easy because it can move and everybody, like the 2 guys come in and out and whatever like that. A 2-person, I'm almost always the host, and it always ends up like, yeah, and so what do you think? Here's this thing that I brought up, and what do you think? And so I like the conversational of it. So we'll see how we do. This will be nice. It'll be a nice little test run for us here. So
yeah, absolutely.
It'll be nice.
Little Thursday night test run, and again, thank you for jumping in, man. It's a heck of a time for you to jump in. Maybe their best game of the season last night, I would argue.
That was a pretty big win against Dallas. Joe Gilbert tossed it up in her game thread. Like, let's hope the home Cavs come out in Dallas, and that was what seemed to happen. So, was definitely excited to see a big win, a nice Donovan game. That even though the down the stretch maybe not so much, but he had one of his big games. The only other game I've watched, obviously, Cavs games as they come along. The one game I went to early on in the year was the Kevin Love game where he went nuts. And Donovan was also big in that one too. And so it's nice to see that he has those. And he really adds a completely different level to this team that, we haven't had in a very long time. So.
Can actually just real quick on that piece, because everyone I've talked to so far this season, I've actually asked that question to about Donovan because he's just an absolute difference maker.
Right.
If I can throw something to you, Gerbs,
sure.
What was your reaction to the Donovan Mitchell trade as soon as it happened? Once you saw, the tweet or what have you, once you saw the package they gave up, the 3 first-rounders, 2 pick swaps, Laurie, Colin Sexton, Ochai Agbaji, what was your initial reaction to that trade?
I legitimately thought that we had fleeced them, which felt like such a weird thing. I mean, and Laurie has gone on to be really great for Utah, as well as Colin. But I mean, Colin only played 8 games last year. Adebayo was a draft pick, so we have no idea what he would have added. But to take a team that made the play-in and pulled just one player from it who was decent, but was almost a bit of a mismatch with the, a 7-foot shooting forward or small forward with Jarrett and Mobley as the bigs. He seemed miscast in that role, and for him to be the only meaningful piece going out that was on the team last year, it was such a big move. I legit was like, they're contenders now. This is it. They are. I mean, I immediately went to I think they're second or third in the East. And they definitely can be. They've played that way. They obviously had some crap fests up there, but they definitely have looked like they could be a hosting a playoff game.
I had to ask you because it's pretty unique that not only the Cavaliers, but just any Cleveland team makes that type of trade for a number one caliber player on another team. It's just you look back and obviously, Kevin Love is huge, but all the great Cavalier moments, Kyrie, LeBron, even Zodrunas, Mark Price, etc. All those guys were homegrown drafted guys. Like
Right.
trading for a guy of that caliber and a number one on a team, it's just something I think it's fun to revisit because, man, that stuff does not happen very often.
For sure. Yeah. And even you saying that made me think, I guess I hadn't realized how much they are a homegrown team. Like Kyrie was drafted here. LeBron obviously was drafted here. And even like the guys that they brought in during like the run of that, Love really feels like a homegrown guy now. You almost don't remember any of the Minnesota years that he had where he was that rebound monster. But yeah, that's just it. That does feel interesting. And obviously Darius Jarrett would be the only other one that's really had any kind of moments, but even he like feels a little. He was good in Brooklyn, but he feels like he's taken up to another level in Cleveland.
100%. Yeah, he's kind of 2x, 1.5, 2x what he ever was in Brooklyn, where somehow he didn't start over DeAndre Jordan, which just still puzzled me. But we're not here to talk about the Brooklyn Nets rotation, so that's okay.
Yes, yeah, totally fine with being with whatever decision they made on getting rid of Jared Allen, and they wanted to get James Harden, which I can't fault them for, but they definitely did not need to flip out Jared Allen on that trade. But all right, so let's get to. I want to mention our one of our sponsors that we have, one of our partners that we have with WFNY, Underdog Fantasy. Great website for you guys. Obviously, football season is starting to wind down. NBA season is starting to kick up. Still in fantasy mode, but this is a DFS option for those of you guys that have DFS fatigue of trying to do the salary cap game. Underdog does a really great option where they do drafts. Every night there's a new draft. NBA, they usually do super flex, so it's like S flex is what it says. First time depositors that use the code WFNY can have their deposit matched up to $100. And I will also put, there's a link that you could do too if you don't want to do the code on the deposit. I'll put it in the notes when we go and post that to the site and on the notes on the podcast, wherever you guys are finding it, Apple or Spotify. But if you click on that link or use code WFNY at checkout, first time depositors on Underdog Fantasy can have their deposits matched up to $100. So make sure you get in on those. I have made quite a bit of money off of Underdog, I'm not gonna lie, and it's nice to have. I was able to buy myself a pair of AirPods, which I'm not using because I have a desktop. So, but yeah, it's nice. I got my cans, I got my podcast microphone. So
for anyone not watching, your microphone is sweet, by the way. I'm severely
it's nice.
jealous.
This was my anniversary present this year. So I started podcasting. My wife was like, "You need a new mic," and I'm like, "Perfect." So yeah, nice and changes. So all right. So the last two games that we had, but that you haven't talked about. Obviously, I'm new. The Spurs game and the Mavs game. We talked about the Mavs game being a big win. Spurs game was a hard luck loss, 1 point loss. What do you think happened with this Spurs game? The one thing that I noticed, and again, I come from a baseball background and a lot of football too. The NBA game is starting to get to me a little bit more. I'm watching more of it. It was very weird that Stevens played 20 some minutes and didn't even attempt a free throw. What was the Achilles heel against the Spurs team that is actually tanking and shouldn't be trying to win, but Cavs are out there, giving them a win at home on the road. So on the road for Cleveland. What happened here with the Spurs game?
Yeah, lethargic. Looked like they didn't necessarily want to be there. Got their doors blown off in the first half. outscored 36-22 in the second quarter. And I don't think they really turned it on. I think it was one of those things where they probably went in with some confidence and just said, hey, we can flip the switch and roll these guys whenever we want to. They did, but they waited all the way till late in the third quarter to do that. They actually outscored the Spurs by 13 in the fourth. Darius Garland with a wide open three to basically seal the game with 2 seconds left, misses it. Donovan Mitchell gets the rebound. I don't know what Donnie was was doing at that last shot attempt. He looked like he had a chance to maybe do like a little step back jumper to win it. Tried to force a pass to Karras, and it just got interrupted. And yeah, I think the theme of that game was just intensity. Like the Spurs just had all the intensity. It looked like they really cared, wanted to be there, wanted to take down one of the top teams in the East. And it's a little cliche, but I think with how long these NBA seasons are, it is true. Like these guys are so good. Effort can win you like a certain number of games per year. And I thought San Antonio just purely paid with effort, while the Cavs were like, all right, we can flip the switch. And man, it was too late. They had their chances even so, but Josh Richardson, who I think we'll probably talk about later in the show, had a tremendous game. He was up towards, I think, 24 or 27 points. He got red hot from three. Another forward, Keldon Johnson. That Spurs have a couple guys who look really good in the Cavalier uniform, but they just didn't miss. And so, some dead eye shooting, and yeah, just that intensity factor really, they really kind of stole the show through the first three quarters, and it was too much for the Cavs to come back upon.
Yeah, we don't hear too much. I mean, we hear a lot of the Cavalanche, that kind of stuff where they put it on defense, and the effort is there at home, especially. Road kind of obviously gets a little bit wonky, but I saw a tweet today that I think if you go and count road wins versus home losses as like a good sign of like early season success, Cavs are like second, I think, in the league and at 4. So, obviously this would be one that they would have marked off, but it's not happening as much as it has in the past, which is nice. Obviously, this is a game that it's not the start of the road trip, right? How long have they been on the road trip?
Just a quick 2-gamer down in Texas.
Okay.
So San Antonio,
Well,
Dallas.
maybe it was maybe you could say this was the beginning of, like you said, they thought you're going to come in and the Spurs are whining for Wembanyama or whatever they're labeling the suck for luck kind of a thing anymore. But thinking they're going to win. It's nice. It's almost, I will say, it's almost nice to kind of have that capability where you're like, the team is confident in themselves that they're going to win, as opposed to, having to like, I don't no idea what's going to happen tonight, but yeah, it happens, and you got to try to work it out. And obviously they came back and were very upset about the game the next day and took it to Dallas last night. So big win. I have marked down all the starters were in double digits. Everybody, like you said, Stevens came back with a little bit of some oomph to his game, which is nice to see. He's been doing all right with the starters role. Obviously, Karras is getting just as much as, if not more, run minutes wise, and he's been proving it lately. I think Dallas game was his first. He had 3 straight 20-point plus games going into Dallas. But you had something about the benches. What was your you had put us in our Discord. What was your stat on the benches here that was very telling about what could actually happen with some other things that we're going to talk about later?
Yeah. Just to echo your point about the Dallas game, they were pissed off. You could tell. And I don't gamble because it's not legal yet in Ohio. It will be in 15 days. But if I were to gamble,
where your VPN is, however, where your VPN tells you that you are, that might be legal.
I may have told my friends and myself with Monopoly money, I may have placed a nice little wager on the Cavs money line plus 110, because you just knew they're going to come in pissed off. And I mean, JB laid into the guys. They were disappointed after the game. Donovan Mitchell had some comments about, we just can't do this as a team. We're too good to have these kind of losses. So you knew they were going to come out and show the fight that, frankly, the Spurs did the previous night. But yeah, Mavericks game was just awesome. The starters carried them per usual. And from a bench perspective, outside of Karras, who to your point has been great the past 4 games, really seeing some of his confidence come back, the bench scored 2 points outside of Karis LeVert. So you got Ofer from Love, you got 2 points from Okoro, Ofer everywhere else. And, I know we're probably going to spend a little bit of time there. I don't want to just overshadow an incredible win, but just shout out to Donnie, man. 34 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. And every time he shoots the ball, I just have a confident feeling. It doesn't matter how, like, quote unquote, bad of a shot it is. He just has so much air to him and just so much presence. I'm just like, when he's out on the court, I'm just drawn to watching the way he moves, because he can get a shot up and make as tough as it gets in the NBA. And then if you press up on him, he's getting to that hole. And man, he had a couple dunks last night that were just spectacular. So, the one thing I took away from last night's win over Dallas, which is the first time that I can recall this year this happening, is Darius was actually not in crunch time, Darius Garland. So from about minute 6, minute 7, all the way down to minute 2, it was Donovan Mitchell really running the show. And he had, Karras, Lamar Stevens, Mobley, and Allen around him. So, Darius Garland not being in was kind of an eye opener for me. He's obviously struggling right now, but they've never to date, said, hey, we're not going to have him in that key pivotal run kind of throughout the stretch when Donovan got hot again and put the game away. So that was something that really stuck out to me is, Darius is going through it a little bit right now. And I personally like JB saying, hey, doesn't matter if you're our $200 million dollar point guard, or if you're Lamar Stevens, the hot guy's going to play. We need to win this game. And that's the way he's going to run the ship.
Yeah. And it speaks to the depth of the team that you're able to pull Darius off for a little bit and still keep going with it. I listen to the Simmons and Russillo podcast a lot, especially when they get together, but individually. And Simmons always brings up, the top 8 or 9 on some of these teams, and Cleveland's just as deep as Boston, just as deep as Milwaukee. And in those respects, they're not names that one of Russillo's points is oftentimes we can think of name recognition as being depth, where if you recognize a guy's name, hey, that's like, oh, that means this is a good deep team. No one in the league really knows Dean Wade, really knows Lamar Stevens' name, unless you're actually watching these games. Seti, or is it Jetty? I always forget. I say Seti. I know it's. I think it's Jetty, isn't it?
I think the professional linguistics guys say Jetty, I believe.
Jetty. I think so too, because they've made like The Last Jetty and like promo stuff like that. Anyway, those guys aren't really talked about in league circles, but they are there depth wise. And getting back to the point, it does show that they are able to have Darius off. When the season started, JB was saying that they were always going to have one of Donnie or Darius on the court at a time. Obviously mixing in the big guys. Those would be, running Eric, Allen and Mobley together is one of their strengths. But it's nice to know that they have that to where they can allow Darius to get back to it. And it also is great to see Donovan take over a game in that way. And it just goes back to what we said before. We haven't seen that in a Cavs uniform since LeBron. There hasn't been a guy that's able to take over at that position and handle his business in that way, which is really great.
Yeah, last year, if Darius Garland, specifically after the Ricky Rubio went down with his second ACL tear, if Darius Garland wasn't having a good offensive game, the Cavs were not winning that game last year. Now, you got Donovan Mitchell who can really carry you. And I mean, Darius has just had a tough go of it this year in terms of injuries. He started with the eye and he was out, quite a bit of time. He had ice on his shoulder 2 days ago before the game, during practice. He injured his hand. He told Chris Fedor, Cleveland.com, that his hand hurt after the game. And he's struggling to score inside the paint this year. So I think this year he is shooting 7% lower on his 2-pointers, 4% lower on his field goals. In the month of December has been tough. He's 40 of 111 and shooting only 36%. So he's having a tough go in December. It's too small of a sample size, but I do think there is something to, if you look at when the Cavaliers have played their best this season, it was when they went 8-0 right after Darius went out and Donovan led the team. I think it's obviously this team is only going to go to where they want to get to with those guys maximizing each other. So it's a moot point, but I just think there's still I say that to really hit home that there's still some things they need to work out. The most effective this team has really been when Donovan's running the show. He's got the big guys that he's so good at pick and roll, and he's got, a shooter and a defender out there. So
Right.
All that to say, they still have some things they need to gel upon. They really need to maximize each other. They're not quite there yet, I don't think.
Yeah. Speaking to Darius being banged up, you had mentioned his shooting numbers 29.3% from 3 in December, which is, like you said, it's small sample size. It's only 7 games, but he's only had one 20-point total in December. Just for reference, through November, he was 42 from 3-point. So that's a big drop off for a guy that is actually he can be an assassin from 3. That's his game. He's not a point scorer or a scorer in the paint, rather, not a paint scorer. That's what I wanted to say. He will get to the line, and he's only missed 1 free throw in December, which is great. But yeah, he's much more of a knockdown guy, which proves the point that as you said, Donovan being there running the show, Darius often is the guy that's passing it off, being a pass first playmaker that way. But when it is his time, he is able to stick it. So.
And he's so good at moving without the ball, and he's such a good shooter that I have no long-term concerns about the fit between the two. They really just, there's a little bit too much for me, a little bit too much stand around and watch for both of them. I think when Darius has the ball, Donovan needs to be relocating his body to find the space behind the 3-point line, and vice versa. Like they just don't seem to move enough without the ball right now. And I think that obviously, if you go watch a Warriors game, that's all that Steph and Clay and Jordan Poole are doing. It's such a threat that they just need to unlock. And I think they'll get there.
Yeah. With time, then that's good. How many, you said, how many games has Darius missed this year? It's chemistry, and it'll start coming along. So, yeah. Next topic we were wanting to get to was the bench play. I have listed Kevin can't buy any love, and he has been in his bag lately, where he is just not getting anything. Is this age? Is this injury? Is this all of it? I know that I was talking to a coworker today about possibly what the team could be adding trade-wise. And I know that Kevin is the vibe guy, is the chemistry guy. But his salary number the only reason he would be moved is because of his salary. His play is low enough to where he should be moved, but I don't want him to. What do you think is going on with Kevin at this point in time?
Yeah, you hit it. Kevin's in hell right now. He's in absolute hell. He's regressed every month so far this season. He had a hell of an October. He was the connector when Darius was out, when Donovan wasn't on the floor. Kevin was the guy initiating early October. Since then, it's been tough. November, he shot 38% from the field, 35% from three, 21 minutes a game. December so far, 34% from the field, 23% from three, only 16 minutes a night. And there's some funky stuff, Joe, with the lineup data. Lineup data is always kind of tricky, but some of the lineup data with him in, it's actually not too bad. But if you watch him play, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks, the team is just hunting him every time down. It's happened the last couple games.
Yeah.
Every single action they get into is trying to get him in the pick and roll, and he just his only play at that point is to try to take a charge, and a lot of those have been coming up as and ones or fouls lately. I do think some of the offensive stuff is the thumb for sure, because he started off shooting the ball so well, in October. I think the thumb is still healing up, and I think we've seen this from all of last season, the playing when he was really played off the court, when he couldn't play against Atlanta, his feet aren't enough for him to not get attacked over and over. So I think the shooting is really on account of the thumb. Unfortunately, I think the defense is just he's never been like a freak athlete. He's a really great rebounder, shooter, initiator. But I think the feet are just getting really slow, and it's tough, man. He might be getting to the point where he's a matchup dependent player, specifically when his shot isn't falling, and that's unfortunately where we've been at the past 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, he was never a big defensive guy. His defense numbers came from his rebounds, and if he's not in the paint, knocking bodies, and he's not getting those defensive numbers, and that he really is a like 3-point line to 3-point line guy right now. He's not really getting in there and banging the way that he was when he was younger. But who of us can say that we are still getting in and banging at those ages? I was, and it's funny, we had the both kind of thing down for Osman. His minutes have just been really crappy lately. I don't know if he's in some sort of a doghouse with JB. He actually didn't play at all against the Spurs. I did not check and see how many minutes he actually played against Dallas, but what is going on with his minutes? Because he is a guy that can be instant offense when they bring him in, but we just haven't seen his shot go down the way that it has. So it seems like they are kind of freezing him out a little bit. It goes to the nature that, as we said, it's a deep team. They're able to let him rest and let him, go other options. But what is Osman's issue at this point in time?
Yeah, because if you go back just a week ago, he had games of 28 minutes, 32 minutes, 28 minutes. He was getting some really good run. And we've seen JB bench Jetty last year, even for a couple weeks, and then he came back in. So the conspiracy theory in me thinks maybe Jetty is in some kind of trade talks, and that's why they've sat him the last 2 games. That's probably not likely because we've got some time till February, I think mid-February, to the trade deadline. My thought is they probably saw a couple things on film and just said, Chetty, we're not playing you if you fall asleep on defense again. And it probably happened again, and he hasn't gotten any run. But I know they're 2 wildly different players, but just the way that teams have been attacking Kevin Love, man. I was screaming in the Discord last night, you got to give Chetty Osman some run, because when Kevin's getting attacked, Osman's not a good defender either, mind you, but when Love's getting attacked and he's not making any shots, at least Osman can give you some of that hotness, that volatility on an upside perspective. He can give you some of that Cavalanche upside where they're not getting it around, especially without Dean Wade. I just find it odd that Osman isn't playing right now because they're running so short. They're running 8-man rotations right now. The starter minutes are way up already. So I just find it a little odd. So I'm kind of looking around the rumor mill, seeing if there's any Chetty Osman trade proposals going on. Nothing yet, but keeping the ear to the ground, because I just think they're running, a little too short right now for him not to get any run at all.
Yeah, it does feel weird. That's probably the one guy that could probably be used a little bit more than what we're seeing, just because Ice just really isn't doing much. We mentioned before the bench players. He was the only other one that scored off the bench last night against Dallas. His offensive game just hasn't been there, and so it's as much as we wanted, and a lot of Cavs Twitter over the summer really thought that he was going to take a step up and be, the fifth piece of the starter puzzle, and it really looks like we were talking about Dean Wade more than we were talking about Isaac Okoro at this point in time, which is just a very funny circumstance. We are a Dean Wade stan. I don't know. I haven't listened to many CavsCasts, but we stan our Dean Wade here at WFNY. We do not. Craig will come find me, even though I am in charge. He will come find me if I not mention that we are the Dean Wade fan club here. So
we refuse to have a small forward that's shorter than 6'9", 6'10", and we prefer him to be somewhat slow and be able to shoot. That's how we like our small forwards in Cleveland. Get off us. That's how we're gonna do things. Okay.
Right. Until we trade for LeBron again, right? Who knows? Anyway, the last bench guy, and it really, I don't know where he's at with if he started too many games. But if he keeps this up, Karis LeVert could be in line for a 6-man of the year. As we said, 3 straight 20-point games, really seems to have gotten it going of late. Did not hit 20 for the Dallas game, only had 10. The starters seem to be they seem to be going almost a playoff atmosphere against Dallas, which makes sense. The Dallas is a very good team. But he's averaging 20 points, averaging 4 assists. Karis always seemed like I don't have an NBA background. What I have seen from Karis, this is pretty much him. He cooks when he's on, and he doesn't he's a little bit of a ball stopper, so it's nice to see those assists up. Is this his final form, or is there another mode for him coming on to where we can see a little bit more out of Karis?
Yeah, I got a little bit of egg on my face, frankly, because last week I was burying Karis. He was stringing together dreadful performances on a time where, a Cavs bench who's in the bottom third in scoring, bottom third in assists, rebounds. The bench is really struggling right now. Bottom 5 team in terms of bench scoring, 28 points per game, 33% from 3 from the bench as well. So just not getting enough. And Karis was a lead culprit of that. Him being the guy that really needs to lead that charge for that second unit. And I was pretty down on him. I said, okay, it's time to look at moves. He's on an expiring deal, essentially 16, 17 mil this year. And it's the last year of his deal. And he put together a beautiful stretch, 4 games in a row of just awesome basketball. He looked like he was hitting the turbo button last night, like on the PlayStation controller, R2 or L2. I forget which one, but he was hitting the turbo button.
I'm a PC guy.
So. PC guy. But man, he's just looked awesome. And that little mid-range shot that he has. So he's so good at being kind of herky. He's got a little different players, obviously, but he's got like a little Darius in him where they're both herky jerky. They're not supreme athletes, but they've both got like that wiggle enough to get around a guy and get open. And finally, Karis's mid-range shots have been falling. He likes to get into that painted area and get his shot up. And one of the things that I don't think he gets enough recognition of, I was having a hard time finding the stat ahead of this, but he's one of the better pick and roll duos with Jared Allen. They obviously have time together with the Brooklyn Nets. And I mean, when Jared gets in when Karis gets in the paint, he has some really good interior passing to the bigs, specifically Jared Allen. So he's really showed that the last couple of games. And yeah, to your point earlier on, I think it's hot and cold, and we're not going to know until we see him that night. But really impressed with him at least bouncing back, because things were going in a pretty negative way pretty quick over the past 3 weeks. And to see him bounce back the last week has been awesome.
Yeah, I was personally ready for the Karras of, experiment to be done. To the point where they had to move him to the bench and start Dean Wade or Lamar Stevens. That's not really a great point, of pride, I'm sure. Not that, those guys aren't good, not that they're not starters. They're just not what this team was expecting. So, I am impressed with Karras at these last couple games. Hopefully this is where he's at now and he's able to be that cook off the bench and ready to I always think of like Jordan Clarkson or even Sexton, those kind of guys that are just like, hey, I'm here for one thing, and it's to make buckets. And if that's where he is off the bench, that's great. That's what they need. And speaking of things that they need, it is, as we are saying, getting into trade season. Christmas is always like right when they start getting there. Some teams start to, it's getting close to midway through. Teams starting to see whether they have it or not. There's a couple of guys that are out there. There's some tweets out you had posted in our Discord. HoopsWire's reporting. I've seen it other places actually before you said HoopsWire. At the Pistons, Alec Burks, and the Magic's Terrence Ross could be among those that are drawing interest for the Cavs. Obviously, what we were saying, the team needs a little bit more bench scoring, needs a little bit more help for these starters. What are those two specifically going to bring the Cavs that are, and what is the ask? What does Cleveland have available to trade at this point? Because obviously the cupboards are kind of bare now after the Donovan deal. What is available out there for Cleveland to trade, and what are these guys that specifically those two? Obviously, it could be somebody else. What are those guys looking at coming back?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a connectivity issue, so I went off camera to save a little juice here. But yeah, I think
totally fine.
Yeah, I think Alec Burks and Terrence Ross, both of those guys being veterans who have bounced around the league, I think those are the type of guys that Kobe try to upgrade around the core. At this point, it's all about upgrading around the core four of Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen. They need to find. It's no surprise they need to find some wing players, some guys that can knock down some threes. No matter how good Lamar Stevens or Isaac Okoro play on defense, they still need a guy who can go make a 3-point shot. So yeah, Burks and Ross, again, around 40% 3-point shooters for this year. A couple other guys I'm looking at, and maybe it was a debut of sorts, or he was trying to show out for his future team, Josh Richardson, who just lit up the Cavs the other night. He's another guy. He's 29, 6'10" wingspan. He's on the last year of his deal. So those kinds of guys where they only have a year left, Josh Richardson, Kelly Oubre Jr., who's on a 1-year deal, $12.6 million. Even, from a wing perspective, those are the kind of guys with 1 year left. I think they're really prone to taking a look at. One sneaky way to upgrade, and I doubt the limited assets they have would go this way, but I think Robin Lopez has had a tough go, and the couple games that we saw early on in the season have quickly vanished from the other appearances we've seen in mid to late November and early December. He's not a guy that gets a lot of minutes, but Jared Allen is so important to this team, and if he goes out, it really screws up the entire lineup. Evan Mobley then gets forced to move to the 5. He plays out of position. So one guy I kind of like, Joe, is again, on a 1-year deal, but Nerlens Noel, who is currently playing for the Pistons, he's on a 1-year deal, $9 million. If you really want to solidify that backup center and you want to kind of beef up for a playoff run, I think that's another guy. Again, I think their assets go to these wing type players. They need them, but if they're somehow able to get 2 guys, I would love to see backup center be addressed. And I think Nerlens is a guy, again, who maybe a second round pick and a little bit of cash filler like a Dylan Windler, could make sense.
You're trying to save Moondog, get Robin Lopez out of here. I see it.
That's right.
No, yeah, I definitely think the wing is where they're going to be looking to add. Obviously, Ricky Rubio is as much of a trade deadline add as anybody else, and really honestly could be a big help to the team. I don't know where he's at with his rehab. I know that I had seen he was on 5x5 drills. So he's going to be back right around the time that the deadline's coming around. Could be within the next couple of weeks. But I think with Rubio there, with Neto, I think, and obviously Karras as a guy that's coming off the bench, your backcourt's taken care of. I'm really interested to see what Rubio is able to do with this team, with Donovan, with Darius. Do they go with a smalls and bigs, or they have a 3-guard lineup out there with Mobley and Allen and just, surround the big men with shooters that way? I think that'd be a really interesting lineup to see. But yeah, to your point, I would like the Oubre signing or trade rather. I would like Alec Burks or even Terrence Ross. Those are the guys that I've heard of. And so it helps that I know those names. But yeah, it's just interesting to see. What do you think they have by way of assets? You said Dylan Windler. I know he's been hurt pretty much his whole career. I don't know if he's actually how many games. I think I can probably count on two hands the games he's actually played for Cleveland. But he would. You were saying him as somebody who could be headed out in a trade. Who else could be on the chopping block for Cleveland?
Yeah, it feels kind of gluttonous. The Cavaliers, who are first in defensive rating, second in net rating, we're talking about adding, but that's just the reality of the Eastern Conference right now. You look at Milwaukee and you look at Boston. The Cavs aren't quite at that level, in my opinion, right now. So they have to add a piece or two if they want to compete this year. Of course, next year, 2 years is a different story. 3 years down the line, all the evolution of this team, different story. But for this season, if you want to give yourself a shot, I think they need to add some shooting. In terms of assets, they do have a bevy of second round picks. And then they do have some tradable contracts. If they want to go really big, obviously we all know the Kevin Love contract is $28 million. So that's a huge contract if you were to package him. I think we're all kind of in the same boat. We'd love to see Kevin retire here, but if they did have a big swing, that's a huge contract. I don't think Karras would be included in a trade, but guys like Cedi Osman, he's like a $7-8 million a year guy. Dylan Windler, again, is like a $4 or $5 million a year guy. Isaac Okoro, who I don't think they'd give him up, but maybe for the right guy, they'd look at it. He's another 4 or 5 guy. So they do have some flexibility if they need to go match some salaries. That's the one thing I think that may be a little underrated. They do have quite a few guys who aren't big contributors that they could send out to bring some cash in. The one tricky thing about from a picks perspective, if the Cavs make the playoffs, which we all think they will right now, being a 3 seed, their first round pick this year goes to Indiana. They really only have their 2024 pick, but because of the deal with Utah where they traded their 25, 27, 29, and 2 pick swaps, I don't even think they can trade their 2024 via the Stepien rule. I think they have to.
I don't think they can.
Yeah. So it's got to be second rounders or 3-team type trade. So they're a little tight, but I think they do have, I will say the one thing in terms of player assets, Isaac Okoro is still only 21 years old. So if you're a team like the Rockets, you're a team like Detroit, it's not the worst thing in the world to take a flyer on a guy who's physically gifted, built, plays great defense, and the only thing that needs to come around is offense. That's a big thing, but being that he's only 21, maybe that's something that a team kind of in the basement would take a look at.
Yeah, I was gonna say Okoro feels like if there is a big swing for like maybe a Bojan Bogdanovic or something like that that a bigger name necessitates a bigger ask. And, if Cleveland's going and playing in that market, Okoro could be out. And, as you said, Okoro is a guy that I would like to keep and hold on to because I think that he could be an underrated player along the lines of not necessarily I'm trying to think of like Milwaukee and Boston guys that are homegrownish, like like a Grant Williams or Robert Williams or something like that. That not obviously not the same positions, but like those guys that have worked their way up to be almost known names in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And guys that those are players that Cleveland needs to hold on to, just because they're not really a free agent destination. I think that's going to change with this Donovan Mitchell trade, and you'll see guys that will come here for pushing in the playoffs and pushing for a ring, but getting those building blocks and making that turning those could be's into actuals, is something that's going to happen with this team as we go on in these next couple of years, because you don't want to play the LeBron game of which aged veteran is available that's going to come in and play for 20 minutes, but they're they're just old. I don't want to play those. I don't want to play those games. It's nice, but it's not.
Yep. And Isaac Okoro is the exact, and I'll throw Dylan Windler in there too. Those are the kind of guys that the Cavs need on this team. Guys that are 6'5", 6'6". There's two wildly different players. Dylan Windler, obviously, they need for the 3-point shooting. Isaac Okoro, a guy who they could use maybe off the bench, to guard the opposing team's best scorer at the time. But they're not in a position to give away wing players unless they're getting at least one, if not more, back. So I totally agree with you. It's unless they're really going for it for a top end guy. It's like I'm not throwing Okoro into a deal as some kind of like filler. It's like if only if it's
Right.
their guy they think gives them a real chance at competing with a Milwaukee and Boston this year. Because 21 years old, that's young, man. He still has some time to grow, and I know it's been ugly this year, but again, I'll go back to 21. He's got some time. If he looks like this at 23, 24, okay, but let's give the kid a little bit more time. Not to say he should play. I'm not saying give him 30 minutes a night, but let's give him another offseason, see how he progresses.
I'm not used to basketball ages. I'm used to like I'm like, oh, he's 21. Cool. He's been here forever, it feels like. Where I'm like, George Valera is 21. And I'm like, wow. So yeah, it's the Guardians are a little bit more, or a little bit youngish on age wise, and being a football guy too, you have to have those 3 years of college where you're like, all right, they're 22, 23 coming in, so they're already like baked in that old. Just not used to it. So we'll get there if this, but yeah, just hit me as funny. That was all.
Yeah, when the Cavs drafted Ochai Agbaji this year, he was older. This Isaac Okoro going into his third NBA season. Ochai Agbaji was older than Isaac Okoro because we drafted him as a young 19-year-old rookie out of Auburn. So yeah, it's just he's just so damn young, man.
Yeah, you don't. Those are the guys that you don't want to give up. And like I said, I don't think the team is going to, unless they're playing in bigger markets, and we won't know that for at least another couple of weeks. And if those are moves that other teams are going to make, Pistons could easily blow it up. Cade Cunningham's out the rest of the year, and so that's their big guy. And so I mean, it makes sense for them if they are going to do something along those lines. That's something that they could do. So, all right, well, that's it for me. That's all I had. Do you have anything else for tonight, there, bud?
Yeah, one last thing. I know we're going long here, but
Sure.
one last one, maybe a personal one. Have
Sure.
you been to any Cavalier games yet this season?
Yes, I went to, like I said, I went to that the Kevin Love Junkyard Dog game where he had the 20 plus points, where he went. His skin was the color of the court. I have never seen a man get so red before. He was just so so fired up and was doing so well. I think it was one of the first I want to say game number 2 or 3 that Darius missed. Like there was talk, it was like right in that beginning of like he could be back. Maybe it's only a game or 2 and end up being 8. So I have been to 1 game this year.
Got it. All right. Last question from me. Favorite feature of the newer? I'm obsessed with Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. I think the
Yeah.
renovations they did was awesome. I
Oh,
love
for
the
sure.
glass.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? If you had to pick one favorite feature, whether it's whether it's the video tunnel, whether it's the court, the glass, the glass walls. What's your favorite feature of the new arena?
I think the video tunnel wall is nice. I am very much my ADHD, whatever you want to call it. Craig and I call it undiagnosed. I need to get to my seats, and then I will figure out things from there. So I don't look at all of the stuff. It is really awesome to see the 2016 team being the first championship team in since the 60s. It's great to see all the old stuff. I'm also not really the guy that's like nostalgia guy. I do love having the giant screens and allowing you to see what's happening on the court, even if no matter where you are. It allows there to be not a bad seat in the house. And I do a lot of stuff with our church's youth group, and so some of the kids are wanting to go to a game. I'm like, yeah, man, we'll get a Loudville seat and just pay $10 and put our backs against the wall and watch on the TV that's there, and it'll be great. So we're planning on or we're working on maybe doing one of those here soon. So
I love it. I had to ask because I'm just so impressed when I go, and I thought you had mentioned you went to the game. So man, it's just awesome over there. So good to hear your.
Well, see, for me it's a big feat. I live south of Youngstown, so it is like almost 2 hours to get to Cleveland for me. So it's got to be either a weekend or b something that I'm like I need to go see this. So we went for a buddy's birthday. Like I said, I think it was right around that weekend of Halloween, where it was a Sunday night, I think. Monday was Halloween, where they played the Bengals, and then they played again on Wednesday. I had a buddy that went up. It was his birthday weekend. We went up on Sunday. He went to the Bengals because he's a Bengals fan. He went to the Bengals game on Monday and got a hotel and stayed until Wednesday. Wow. And just like stayed up there like for the weekend, basically, and had a residence. Basically, he went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But yeah, for me, it's a big trek. It's a big drive. So we don't make it too often, but when we do, we make sure that we try to get up there. So next time I'm up there, if I do go to a game, I'll let you know, and we'll try to make a meetup. So.
Hell yeah. And who says no one vacations in Cleveland? Case in point, your buddy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Everyone can back off with those comments. Yeah.
Right. We go to it's the Cleve. That's what you do for 30 Rock fans. You go to the Cleve if you want to get out of town. So
that's right.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for me, for Seth, for the CavsCast. That'll be it for us tonight. Like I said, you guys will hear this more than likely tomorrow morning, unless you are still watching on Facebook. If you do, you drop us a comment or a like, and you guys have a great night.